So Noam, thanks for coming on. A few days ago, or I think a few days ago, your film was on featured on Variety. Can you
Yeah,
tell the story around that and how that got kind of all started?
yeah, for sure. So, my friend and collaborator, I guess, on this movie I did called Teacher's Pet. His name's Luke Barnett, really talented writer, actor, filmmaker himself, and he had this idea for a short film that was kind of like a bit of a satire on the topic of these like very long standing ovations that you see every year at Cannes and these other big festivals that just go on for so long and it becomes almost like comedic. And then people start competing over them and seeing like who had the longest standing ovation. So basically, he had that concept, and we kicked around a couple of ideas back and forth. We ended up deciding to go ahead with this one concept, and we talked about like should we raise money and do this as like a full production, but because it was so topical and so kind of like of the moment right now, we didn't want someone else to get to the idea first. So we just thought, let's just go shoot it, do it like with some friends, whoever we can kind of like round up in the next few days, and then put this thing together. And then we did submit it to South by Southwest, but then like literally the day after, we had been also sending it to like Luke's manager and other people kind of in our network. And we ended up getting a lot of feedback where people are saying, yeah, just put it out there and maybe see if you get some press on it. Variety ended up picking it up, so then we ended up saying, we're not going to like worry too much about festivals. Obviously, if it gets in, great, but a lot of festivals are they want a premiere status. But so much of the benefit to us of like going to a film festival is then maybe more people see it there, then maybe we get some press on it, and all that stuff was kind of happening without the festival. So we just decided, let's just put it out there. And it's had a really good response. It's led to some really interesting opportunities. We might even turn it into a feature now. So it's been a wild couple of weeks. This all started literally like 3 weeks ago. So it's happened fast for sure.
I just feel like it was something that needed to be made. Something like it's just the most bizarre tradition of like counting minutes of like applause. It's like it's so strange.
It
But
is.
like,
It's crazy. Yeah.
and you said the lead actor he wrote that.
Yeah, so he came up with the idea. There was no script, but what he did write
Okay.
was like he wrote himself like an inner monologue that he said he didn't really use it on the day, but it was just kind of helpful for him to like go through the emotions. So he wrote down like, I can't believe I'm finally here. I made it. This is my big moment. Like, what if this doesn't happen again, or what? Like all the different ideas that might have actually been going through his head. He just kind of like wrote those down, and then. But yeah, there was no actual script. It was just kind of this concept that Luke had, and then his performance, which it all sort of hangs on. And I think he sent me this audition tape. I don't know what you'd call it, like a proof of concept. This thing he shot on his iPhone of him basically doing the whole thing just in front of like a TV screen in the background. And that was like the template for the short film, which followed almost like beat by beat his same reactions and everything. And yeah, it kind of worked out well. And one take was me and my friend Andy Chin who shot it with us. He was the DP. There was no other crew, and it was just like really really fast and kind of a fun experiment.
Okay, because the whole time I was watching, I was like, "How do you write this?" But inner monologue. Okay, that makes sense. Or inner dialogue. Did you guys have like timers like behind the camera, or like how did that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So what we ended up doing was we found this like 5 minute. We knew we wanted it to be about 5 minutes because it felt like if it was too short, you wouldn't get that feeling. Like we almost want you to. I don't want to say like be bored by it, but we want you to feel at a certain point that like, okay, this is going on for a long time because that's what actually happens in reality. But then we don't want it to be like so long that it actually does get boring. So we figure like 5.5 minutes would be kind of a good length. So we found a real standing ovation video. I forget which movie it was now off the top of my head. But it was like a 5 minute clip, and we just played that background noise in the background. And so for me to like, direct it, basically what I was doing was, we had the camera locked off. We set up my laptop with that video playing just for like background noise and to kind of get everyone like in the zone. And then I was like, Luke is so good at knowing like what he was doing that I just like basically let him do his thing, and I didn't mess with that because we had talked about it so much beforehand too, and he knew exactly what to do. But the background actors were a big part of it, like making sure their eye lines were like looking at the right place, or like, almost the entire time I was cueing them, just saying like, all right, bigger applause, smaller applause, like you guys just heard something funny, like, just so that they would all be like in unison. So there was a lot of that going on. There's a lot of like, anytime you see someone walk past the screen, like doing like this in front of the camera, it's just me like wiping myself, because like there's nobody else to do that. So I was literally like holding this iPhone that had a feed from the Red camera on it, looking at like the timer also on my phone, looking at the like video feed that was playing in the background, and then walking back and forth cueing the actors. So I was almost like improving the directing in a weird way, while Luke was kind of like improving the acting, and it all just came together, I guess, the way that it did.
Yeah, because that is interesting from like a director standpoint, like that whole thing, the whole choreography of that. Um, but okay, in terms of you, like you're very interesting to me because you seem to have taken advantage of like like you're like a filmmaker who's taking advantage of like the new age of social media, and I think you've done that really well. And like you think for filmmakers, these new mediums, you could say, like would go easily go hand in hand, but I feel like it's kind of for most have been just totally untouched. So like how do you think like up and coming filmmakers should be using these new like tools?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question because there's no path, and like I have a definitely a love-hate relationship with the whole like internet social media thing. Like I've always been like, when I grew up, like I learned like, early on, like the internet was coming out when I was still a kid. It was like in its infancy. So like I kind of learned a lot of stuff like website building and HTML when I was, a teenager, just on the weekends or like over summers. So like I was always sort of like interested in the internet and like building my own sites and just finding a way to kind of like leverage that as a medium. But I never realized it would converge with my interest in filmmaking until it just naturally kind of happened over the years. And honestly, like what really started it for me, and again, I can't say, I don't know if this quite answers your question, but just to give you some background, it was like I was moving here. I grew up in Canada and I wanted to move here to LA. I had to get, a visa, and then now I'm a citizen, but I had to go through all these different steps. And part of that is like you need to be visible. If somebody's searching my name on the internet, I needed to, come up. So I was like, why don't I build a website? I'll do a blog, and I'll start to like just share some of the stuff I'm learning on cameras. And it ended up sort of taking off, and then that turned into like a podcast, and I started sharing more on social media and other stuff. But for me, all of those things were always like very secondary to my actual like filmmaking and all the other stuff I was doing, even with my business. Like I had a production company at the time and some other business ventures and things that I was getting into. So I guess like for me, it made sense to pursue it because I had that kind of like natural affinity in a way for it. Like there's so many things I'm not good at, but I felt like I kind of understood the internet in a way. And by no means, like for anyone like, listening to this or whatever, I'm not like, that's not my full-time thing. I'm not like, there's people with millions and millions of followers that like they do exclusively stuff online, and they do exceptionally well at that. But I think what I realized is like, even if you're not that person and you don't want to necessarily be like a full-time social media personality, like you can still leverage with a very small amount of time. Like you could still grow a pretty good audience of the right kind of people, so that when you do go and release a film, you could like email your newsletter with 20,000 or 50,000 people, and those people can go and like tell their friends or leave a review or whatever. So I do think that I think you have a big advantage in a lot of ways if you're willing to kind of like embrace like the newer age of like social media and putting yourself out there in that way. I don't think it's mandatory. There's certainly plenty of filmmakers that like just make films and do the festival circuit and network, and they find other ways in. But I think that if you're not opposed to it, there's just so much benefit that you get from doing that. And I think you learn a lot also about like your own work as a filmmaker as you're like, I know like this may sound a little bit like I guess separate from the filmmaking side, but when I like if I'm posting stuff even on Instagram, I'm kind of subconsciously learning at a certain point. There's a certain type of content that people are responding to more than something else, and like how do you hook someone in the first few seconds of a reel? A lot of that translates then to filmmaking. Like how do you hook somebody in the first 5 pages of your screenplay? And you know, so much of it's human nature, where you're learning things from social media or from, you know, what you're doing online that do apply to the film and, you know, work and vice versa. So yeah, I mean, in short, not mandatory for people, but I definitely think you got to try it, because there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, and I think like you said, like there's a certain like friction of creation with like new technology that's kind of gone away. So now you can actually make all these things, and you. But that's what I was saying when in terms of it seems like filmmakers could utilize these skills to build followings and to help promote their films. And I think a lot of filmmakers have, and I mean it's kind of like a traditional business almost. Like it's like there's an aversion to, say, like YouTube, and I don't know. I feel like when YouTube came out, I feel like if more filmmakers hopped onto that, it could have been uh, a great like home for filmmakers. But you've posted a lot of your films on YouTube, and it seems like they've done very well. Like, how do you
Yeah.
see YouTube? Do you see a future for filmmakers on YouTube?
Yeah, I do. I love YouTube, and I think like honestly, for the right project, it is probably the best place that you can put it, because if you think of it, like if you make, especially if you're making like lower budget, like, you know, I've made like one of my features that's on there is a no budget movie I literally made for like a few $1,000s. It could have been done for $0. It was me and no other crew and a couple of actors, and I put it on there because, you know, ultimately my goal with that is not to get it in theaters and like make millions of dollars with it. My goal is to get people to see it and then hopefully attract other cool people, whether it's actors or producers or investors who might want to work on the next project with me. And so when I think of it through that lens, then really the goal is visibility. It's not like a monetary benefit. And so where do you get the most visibility? It's really YouTube. Like there's just no other platform that has that many eyes on it. And again, like I'm not a YouTuber. Sometimes I wish I was, because I see so much potential in it. But even not being a YouTuber, even having a very modest following on there, like I could drop a movie on there. One of my shorts has like 4 million views. One of my features has like 400,000 or whatever views. Most of the features I put on there have in the tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views, and you just can't get that like on any other platform. And that's for a few reasons. Like one big reason is like the language barrier. So if you go through a traditional distributor, you put it even on Amazon, which has a massive audience too. But like if your movie's in English, then that's only going to go to English territories. But if you're on YouTube, someone in France or Germany or wherever that's speaking a different language, they could go and watch your movie, and there's auto captions that like auto translate and all these different features. So people are able to watch your film all over the world, and you're like increasing your audience by 10 times or 100 times potentially. So yeah, I think like, should you put your films on YouTube? I do think under many conditions and circumstances you should. I think there's also times when like you don't want to do that right off the bat, because there's a certain prestige to obviously getting into festivals and going the traditional route with your film, and you can 100% do that as well. But whether it's the first place you put your film or the last place, at some point in most filmmakers' journeys on any given film, like it usually makes sense to put it in front of the biggest audience possible. The last thing I'll say about that is like my last movie I did, Teacher's Pet, it's coming out. We're actually securing a really good couple of distribution deals domestically and foreign right now. That film was my first movie that was like a little bit more traditionally financed, even though it's a low budget film. It had an investor and producers on board and everything. It wasn't just me running around with a camera. And that movie directly came out of my experience making that $0 movie and putting it on YouTube. So like there's so many people that don't want to do that, and they're like, no budget movies, like there's pointless, it's going to live on YouTube. But it's like, yeah, but then you put it on YouTube, somebody sees that, and then they call you and they want to finance your bigger movie. So if you can skip that step and you have, the ability to do that somehow, then great. But I don't know. Like for me, it's always better to just make something than sit around and cross my fingers and hope that somebody's going to come and write me a check when I haven't really done anything to earn it yet.
Yeah, and I mean, considering that, like just being able to post it and get something an audience over the internet, and um, how do you see with new tools coming out, new technology every single year, the friction is being taken away in terms of production, hopefully, especially for like independent filmmakers, I think. How do you see like the filmmaker of the future, at least like the independent filmmaker of the future? Where do you see that going?
Yeah, I think like really it goes back to the thing that is always at the core of filmmaking, which is having a vision. Because I was thinking about this the other day with like AI and what happens when anyone can just prompt like a movie idea. And right now, like it doesn't, none of these platforms can do a good enough job. But like, what if in 5 years you can just type in like, make me, the next season of Stranger Things or whatever, and it does like a really good job of doing that. And it might, but the thing is, if the barrier is no longer having to raise money or having to like actually produce something and work with actors, at some point those there will be such an abundance of material, and there will still need to be somebody who curates that material or who chooses what is getting made or not, and that choice is ultimately going to come down to your vision. And so that sort of, I know what you're asking about obviously isn't AI specific, but I think I kind of use that as an analogy because ultimately, the easier it becomes to make things, the more important your vision is. Like it's one thing, like if it's like impossible to make something, you could have like not the best vision for a movie, but just shoot it really beautifully. And if nothing else looks like that, then that's enough. But now when everything looks good, when everything sounds good, you can clean things up, color correct, like, then it becomes about what are you actually saying? What's your point of view? And that's really the core essence of what directing is. So it's just, democratizing the whole film business more and more every year, whether it's on the AI side, on the technology side, being able to shoot like log ProRes on your iPhone now, which is insane. Like I just matched my iPhone to an Alexa 35 and posted it on Instagram, and a lot of people couldn't tell the difference, which was which. And it's just, there's so much amazing development happening now, which just means you have to really rely more on your own creativity to kind of like rise above everybody else who can make pretty good work with pretty, minimal effort.
Yeah, and it seems like it, as it gets more and more democratized, it's almost like you could see this is maybe only the beginning of the art form, but at the same time as AI comes, it's like, okay, maybe it will end the art form. But I
Yeah.
mean, essentially, like, I mean, people always want something. I mean, I wouldn't say always, but they always want something new and different. And so maybe there will be like a period of time where there's a ton of AI content that everyone's watches, and then maybe they'll go back to the real stuff because that's what's different. It's the only way to get something different. At
Yeah.
that point, maybe.
Well, I think
Um,
you're right. Like,
yeah.
sorry to jump in on that, but I think you bring up a good point because I think that there's someone, I forget who said it recently, but somebody brought up an interesting observation that it's like you don't fall in love with the art, you actually fall in love with the artist. Like, if you want to listen,
Mhm.
like when I grew up, it was a lot of like, Nirvana, let's say, or whoever. So it's like you're really like you can prompt. You could go to 11 Labs right now, and you can prompt it to say, "Make me a new Nirvana song," and it will sound pretty close to Nirvana, and it'll sound like Kurt Cobain. But those tools have been out now for like a year or 2 years, and nobody is listening to these fake artists because even if the music sounds like technically good or it works on some kind of basic mathematical level, there's no artist behind it. So you can't, it's like if you're listening to Jay-Z, like you're listening to the music, but you're also aware of what is his story of how he grew
Mhm.
up, and how he had to like get out of this like, difficult life that he was living and the situation that he was in. So I do think like you hit it on the head a little bit when you're talking like content, because I think content versus art, sometimes they're the same thing. Like art can be content, but not all content is art. And so I think the content that is not art. Like if you're like, I have kids now, so like if they're watching like Coco Melon, which is like the most basic, it's like literally nursery rhymes set to like 3D animated characters, and it's like the lowest form of animation in a lot of ways. Like that could easily be done, in my opinion, with AI. But like I don't think AI is ever going to make like the next like Paul Thomas Anderson movie, because also to do those things, people love the actors, they love the human beings, they want to see Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever actor, and that actor is not going to want to act in a script that was written by AI. They're going to want to work with a director that has a vision. So yeah, so I think that AI will create a separate, to me it's less of a replacement for film. It's almost more of like what happened with VR. Like when VR first came out, everyone's like, all right, like going to the movies is done because you could just put on this VR headset. You don't need a real theater. But turned out like people did want still the communal experience, and VR became better for like gaming or other experiential use cases. So I think that's what's going to happen with AI storytelling. I do think it's going to explode, but I think it's going to be a totally separate thing. And I think film will always be its own thing. It'll probably never be as big as it once was in like the 70s and 80s and New Hollywood and Spielberg and all of those days, just because everyone's attention is split so much now with all these other things, let alone what's coming around the corner. But I do think, filmmaking will always exist in some way, shape, or form. And there's always going to be a need for it, even if it's, gets to be a bit of a smaller thing, I guess, as the years progress.
I'm so happy you just said that because I was watching with my roommate the Shining the other night,
Yeah.
and it's so much of my enjoyment of that film just comes from like the story behind the story, you know,
Yes. Yeah.
and like to think like, oh, this like legend, Stanley Kubrick, man, like it's just like, and there's so much like lore information about the behind the scenes, the shooting of that, and I think like art in general is we want to be inspired by human being, like we're like a human made this. There's so much to that. Like we want to be inspired by people, like when you get excited while watching something, you always know like, okay, like a human being made this, like it's cool, like they're kind of, it's like a professional athlete almost, like pushing the limits of what you thought was possible. I don't know if that's a perfect example, but
Yeah. No, but it
you're,
is, I think. It's like, with the imperfections too, because there are human imperfections that make something charming to watch. And that's why like the most famous actors or actresses, like they don't look like perfect models. Models are a different thing for like photography, but actors have a little bit of character and flaw to them. And like, that's kind of a bit of a microcosm or, a parallel to, I think, with the AI thing. Like you can create, like we've had years now of like going on Midjourney and typing in like, make me a new Salvador Dali painting. But like, there's not a single art gallery in the world that's hanging one of those up. And people are still going in, paying like good money every day to go and see the real thing. So yeah, so I do think, the human element is always going to be important. And I think AI will empower people to like do more and more as the years go on. But yeah, I don't think it's going to like replace the entire medium.
and so do you think, how do I ask this? Would you say, answer this one first. Would you say that there, as time goes on and as AI gets better and better, and there's more and more tools and they're easier to use, do you think there's going to be a less of an emphasis on technical skills?
Yes, I do. Or at least, at the very least, like the technical skill will morph. Like it'll become less about like physically knowing how to light a scene and more about like knowing the difference of like a soft and a hard light, so you can, like achieve that through some other means faster. So I do think that, I always think that like technical, I think just the way that our brains work, like if we're technically minded and creatively minded and we can like fuse those things together, that's usually when we get the best results. And so I don't think like, knowing how to physically like set up a camera, like how to format your camera cards or things like that. Like I think so much of it's going to get easier and easier, but I think that that's probably going to open the door for other technical challenges that we may not even be aware of yet. And so we should still kind of like be open and adaptable to learning those new technologies because again, there's always going to be need for it. It just may kind of like shapeshift a little bit and become less about like the direct application of the technology and more about like some new side thing that is, again, unknown to me at this point, but that may be like a requirement that we have to learn kind of in the future.
It's interesting what you said because when I first discovered you, I saw your social media and I started watching your films, and I was interested in this idea of and we touched on this a little bit before, but uh, how as a filmmaker you gain certain skills that you have to. There's a wide array of especially as a director you learn all these different skills, kind of technical skills. So like I'm sure you've done your fair share of writing. I mean, that probably benefited you writing blogs and stuff like that. And to write a blog 30 years ago, you would have had to to be like published in a newspaper or
Yeah,
something like that,
exactly.
or like
Yeah.
to have a podcast, you need to be on the news or the TV. Do you
Yeah.
think that so you can cross into different mediums and still use the skills that you've gained? Do you think that as time goes on, like filmmakers and artists in general kind of cross pollinate between like larger mediums? Like for instance, like a filmmaker could use their skills to like create or like direct a video game or
Oh,
something like
that's
that.
yes,
You know?
100%. That's actually such a smart question, and yeah, I agree. I never thought of it that way, but I do think that that will be the case because a lot of artists are interested in different things. Like we see every year there's like so much crossover. Like a certain musician that had a lot of success is now acting in movies or directing their own music videos, or an actor becomes like whatever, they go into some other creative field, they start painting, they start like going into dance or whatever it is. Like there's so much crossover, and I think the main reason that people don't do that more is because there is such a learning curve. Like I've been working on films like since I was in high school, so it's like literally 20 years of just like kind of messing around with cameras and trying to find what I'm doing. And only now do I feel like I'm finally starting to like get it, where like I trust myself to kind of like put the thing on the screen that is in my mind. And, I still have a lot to learn, but it takes so long. So to be able to kind of shortcut that and be able to say, instead of it taking 20 years, it's like in 5 years, not only can I make the film I want to make, but I could also make an album that goes with it. And then I could make the key art for it. And I could kind of be this like multifaceted artist. I do think there might be more of like a Renaissance period where, because there have been periods like that in history when I talk sometimes, often actually a lot about like Leonardo da Vinci, and I've read his like biography and studied him a lot. And at that point in time, like it was actually common to be many things. Like you might be an artist and an engineer, and you might be like designing like weapons that were used in the wars at that time, and like and a doctor and all these other things, and it was just kind of the normal thing. Da Vinci did it particularly well, and with like a genius a lot of the other people at that time did not have. But I do think we're going to see more and more of these like multifaceted artists, and there will be more of that crossover on the high level as well as kind of the low level as well.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there used to be these Renaissance men, even in early America, who like did all these different things, like like a Ben Franklin, and then I think things got so much more complex. Like you could spend like 20 years, I don't know about 20 years, but like mastering like Adobe Premiere,
Yeah.
or like just like a single software for this one super specific function for this super specific reason. And it's like I'm hoping AI can kind of simplify things, which is maybe too hopeful, but yeah, I think maybe that's will level it out, but then
Yeah.
also maybe it'll just destroy everything and kill all of us.
No, I think like I can imagine a world where you're watching the dailies back, and instead of manually logging clips and putting them in a timeline and then trying to remember which one you liked and looking at the markers, then building your assembly edit, you're just talking as you go, and you're like, you know what, I like this. Let's use this as the opening shot, and then you get into the next scene. I want to cut to her reaction here at some point. Then you get to the next take. It's like, all right, let's use this as the close. And then by the end of it, all that data is already in there and your timeline is like built out, and maybe you have to finesse it a little bit, but you know, like all the shots that you wanted in there, and that, you know, you're making that decision. You're still curating what you want on the canvas, but you're just doing it without having to use the you know, physical tools that are going to slow you down in that process. And then to your point, I think you can develop those skills in like a fraction of the time, because if you don't need to know how to, you know, it's just like if you're editing on digital versus on like an old manual, like actually cutting real film, you're going to learn how to edit way faster digitally just because that tool is facilitating that. So I think your point is 100% accurate.
Yeah. Okay. Final question. I snuck one in for me.
Yeah, no
Um,
worries.
okay. So I'm a film student at DePaul. I'm a sophomore. And this opportunity recently came up for me to like go to Estonia for 2 months to direct like a feature doc about a World War II survivor and his farm. And so that is like a lot. Okay, so that I mean that's like so obviously 2 months of filming and then probably like a year or like 2 years of editing. I don't know how that will go. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but I could hopefully figure it out. But you know, seeing that I'm in like this, you know, I'm in a developmental phase. Like I try to write and direct like a film like every couple weeks or so, or like edit together a doc and stuff like that. I have a dilemma. So like, do you think I should go balls to the wall on this big project for like a year, or do you think I should keep doing the? I mean, no matter what, I'm gonna do the doc project. But or do you think I should? Do you think it's better to, um, yeah, stick with like small projects, and like you know, quickly shooting something, directing something, producing something, putting it together? What do you think is better, like developmentally?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll say this: it's less about like the length of the project or even the genre or anything like that. Although that does sound like a really cool subject matter, but I would say that it's more about like I would go through like the pros and cons, and I would remove the con of am I not wanting to do this just because it feels like a scary thing where it's like I have to travel, I have to do, I have to take something on that's like a big commitment. I have to make certain sacrifices. Like sometimes those are actually the best projects. And I'm not saying in this case it is, but like I know for myself, there's been certain things where like I almost didn't want to do them. And then I did it because I realized the only reason I'm not going to do it is not because it's not a good idea. It's not going to be a good film. It's just because like it's pushing me out of my comfort zone. And those always end up being the best projects. So I would say whatever pushes you out of your comfort zone is the thing to kind of run toward, because that will really like you'll even if you don't like the film at the end, or it's not released, or worst case scenario, that's it. Like you'll still learn so much from that experience. And then going back and making like the shorts like you're making now, that'll feel probably 100 times easier. So I guess like, again, I'm not saying that that's the way to go. Maybe there's something else with what you're doing now. But then if you're staying with your current system, I would then look for ways to like, how do you challenge yourself to keep leveling it up and keep changing it up? Whether that's like, doesn't have to be on a budget level. It's just like creatively speaking, you know, subject matter that's like, oh, I really want to do this story, but I'm afraid of like what somebody's going to think or say, or this is too controversial. Like, I think those are the things that you like go all in on. But as far as like long term, honestly, like I said, I've been doing it 20 years. I'm still having the same things. Like I was like, I almost didn't do that short film last month because I'm like, I've been making features. I should, you know, I have a bigger feature that's hopefully going to happen soon. So I'm like, why do I need to do a short film? But then I was like, no, why not? Like it's always, there's always something good that you can get out of just creating stuff. And then that short film ended up like being more, you know, in a way like more advantageous to my career than some features that I've done. And it was made in like 5 hours. So you just kind of never know. And I think like, you know, whatever you pick will not be perfect. So what I would do is just like I said, run toward the thing that like seems like it's the smartest move and is the most personally challenging, and then and know that like you have many years to like figure it out. And when that's done, you could go do the shorts, do another feature, do another doc. Like, you know, it's going to take time. So there's almost no wrong answer. I don't know if that confuses things more, but
No.
yeah, there's almost like no wrong answer. And I think as long as you just keep making stuff, you'll wind up in a good place either way.
Yeah, I think what's important for me is like to not go crazy. I just have to like dive into stuff if I don't have a project or I'm still, thinking, waiting for an idea or, writing a bunch and I always just want to dive into something. So I definitely think a bigger project would be really exciting for me right now.
Yeah, and there
Um,
might be ways to like do both, like do the bigger project, but
mhm,
like things that take a year or 2 years, like you're typically not working on them 40 hours a week every week. So
yeah.
you may very well be able to sneak in weekend, short films and things, if you have the stamina for it as you're doing it. But yeah, I mean, to have any opportunity like that at like, honestly, like I was like 25 when I first started like I was making films like skateboarding videos and stuff in high school, but like it took me till I was like 25 to be like, yeah, I'm gonna actually try to like figure out what a prime lens versus a zoom lens is. So like I was
Yeah.
like a late bloomer for sure, and then I kind of ramped it up and just figured out how to get it all in my brain quickly and educate myself on the basics. But I think like for you at your age, like to take any opportunity is there's almost no wrong choice other than to just like say no to things unnecessarily.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you for that. So what's next for you? Got
So
anything
yeah,
coming up?
next I'm working on. I have two other shorts that I want to do this year. One I can't give too much detail on yet, but it's an actor I've wanted to work with for a long time. He's actually an Oscar nominee. We've been table reading this thing, and he's gonna hopefully do this short that we're trying to set up. There's another short that is a very quick genre piece I'm gonna put out on YouTube. I have a feature called Sleepwalker that I wrote. And that looks like it's likely to get financing. So I'm kind of in the discussions for that now. And just looking at like other opportunities, I've had some like managers and reps and people reach out this year, which is kind of like a newer thing. So I'm taking meetings right now and trying to see if I could also get some, directing gigs just for hire on TV shows or series or whatever. So yeah, so lots of experiments and again, like no perfect choices, but just kind of learning as I go, and that's basically the gist of it.
Sounds fun. A
Yeah.
lot of different stuff. All
Yeah,
right,
it's
dude.
well, thank you so much. I wish I could talk to you for longer too, but like I said, I was terrible about scheduling this to begin with, and kind of, have this other thing to jump to. But any other follow-ups, just email me, call me anytime, and I'd love to, help out however I can.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, I really like talking to you. It's just it's good to hear from like a older, more experienced filmmaker. Around me, it's just a bunch of hooligans.
Yeah,
Like we're just trying to.
I hear you, but that's fun. I wish I was back with my hooligan friends too sometimes. But it's true. It's good to get a mix because like your peers are smart too, and they have opinions, and it's like this thing people always talk about of network across, not up, which is like it's like the people around you. Like some of them will stop being filmmakers, but some of them, and yourself included, will probably be really great filmmakers. And so like you don't want to take that for granted, but it is good to get perspective from people at different stages in their careers too, because yeah, we often end up going through the same things. So why not make some of the mistakes that I had or others my age had. But again, I appreciate you reaching out about this, and I guess I'll jump into my next thing here, and we'll touch base soon.
Yeah, thank you for coming on.